allowing the Iranians to take, center stage and become the forefront. And now you have larger adversaries like Russia and China that are backing Iran and other countries against the United States and NATO. But you have a global picture right now you can see was begun by President Obama. And in previous interviews I've done with you about Benghazi and other things, they describe the nature more detailed about how the historical events play into what's happened today. So I don't want to kill your listeners' ears, but I want to make sure they understand that. So
I think we should touch on that again as a reminder to them as to what that kind of triangle is about. The Benghazi component has come back around. It's come up and peaked up, and it's not, I don't think it's ever going away because it's a benchmark in time.
Well, Benghazi was a big deal. I'll tell you why. During the lead up to the second term President Obama was in 2012, he was trying to become president again. Many things took place that should never have happened. One of them was the Benghazi event, which was swept under the rug. Benghazi was not actually a war zone at the time, but it turned into one by 2012. And during that time period, Ambassador Stevens, who was going to blow the whistle on illegal arms operations, wound up being killed with lessened security, and the State Department stopped the military from going to aid the ambassador. There was a false narrative put out not too long ago, again, about the ambassador having died of smoke inhalation in the annex, and that's a lie. The truth is many people saw a video of the ambassador being drugged around by a bunch of local nationals, brutalized and beaten, and then brought to the hospital, where he only lived for 30 more minutes in the hospital in the care of the doctors who desperately tried to save him. And this was all done while President Obama was in office and running for re-election. At the same time, our embassy in Egypt was overrun by followers of the Morsi Brotherhood, even though Abu Morsi was the president of Egypt and just deposed Mubarak. And that became an issue where the State Department had advised us that they want to let the Morsi Brotherhood try to regain control on their own. The same time Benghazi went off, that's when our embassy was overrun in Egypt. Now, other things that took place was when bin Laden was killed under Obama, we were not allowed to report on any Sunni-led attacks from Al-Qaeda and soon al-Assad. We couldn't report on anything that dealt with any Sunni-led extremist groups, and ISIS wasn't even created back then. So what that did is that gave him a playing field to say that I no longer have to worry about, Al-Qaeda. I destroyed bin Laden. Now I can become president again in that realm. And that's simply not true.
Do you think that he actually... Sorry, we have a delay here. Do you think that he actually killed him? Did he actually capture him? Was he actually taken out for real?
He was really killed, 100%. I know that kid, Nick Snow, decided to run his mouth about bin Laden being alive because he and another guy that trains birds for a living want to collect the $25 million bounty. That's $25 million US dollar bounty on him, saying he's still alive in Iran. The problem was that President Trump decided to retweet that, which was just absolute garbage, and he never corrected himself. He should never have done that, and he should have corrected it immediately. He's dead as a doornail. He was buried at sea so that nobody could use his body as martyrism. That was the whole point of it. So there's a real stigma behind that, but yes, he's dead.
Wow. Okay, so Obama was trying to get into office at the time, and all this set up for him to look better in doing so.
Right, and what was taking place was the entire Middle Eastern corridor was turning into Shia. And the Sunnis were trying to fight back, and they were trying to get dominance in a place back in office and back in their own realms and their own countries. And we were not allowing that to happen. I don't know why the Obama administration decided not to do that, but that blew my mind, because that disenfranchisement of the Sunnis is what led to the creation of ISIS. I know a lot of people can say they're experts out there in how ISIS was created, but you all can whistle Dixie, because I'm telling you, ISIS was created as a counterweight to the Middle East turning Shia. And one of the examples was my Rafia Sawi case. Rafia Sawi is a Sunni that was a former minister of finance in Iraq. He burnt the central bank of Iraq down, stole 12 billion US dollars, shoved it into banks in Brazil. And then I wanted 4 years later to take Sawi, get our money back, and to put him back into office because there were so many Sunnis being removed in office in Iraq. And when they attempted to arrest him, Prime Minister Maliki did so back in 2012. That's what kicked off 14 Middle Eastern countries that were Sunni dominant to protest and even riot somewhat against the United States and the West because we allowed this to happen. This should never have happened. And nobody, and even when I had my mission at CENTCOM that I put together and I went to execute my mission, it was shut down by General Austin and the White House. And all I was doing was getting the guy and removing him from, basically he was hiding in Mosul, and I was going to remove him from Mosul because we had no U.S. forces there. So my mission was to get him out of there and to get our money back, get all the Al-Qaeda names we could, and to get any information we had on the former president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, who also stole U.S. money at the time, and try to put that together. And then if we could, put him back into office to quell some of the violence and settle the Middle East down. Because remember, Syria was already at a raging war from 2011 on, and the Russians were backing Assad, another Shia. So all of this got shut down by General Dempsey, the White House, General Austin, and General Flynn was involved with that as well. So that's kind of the background and sort of the time frame of how we're looking at what we are today. And then if we fast forward to the current day's rates, from 2017 till now, we've had a problem with Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro murdered his civilian population on anybody that went against him. He killed the whole Supreme Court but one guy, and he went ahead and used these military tactics, and then he started destroying the bodies at warehouses so that no UN Rights Commission could get them. And with Venezuela, we just needed to really do a police action against Maduro because Juan Guaido won the presidency years ago in Venezuela. Now you're fast forwarding, and Venezuela and Maduro have cut deals with Silva de Lulu out of Brazil. Excuse me, has also cut deals with the Middle East, with Russia and China, saying he backs them and he backs the Russians against the Ukrainians, and he also backs the Hamas against the Israelis. And we're not doing much about it. And now he's trying to invade one of his neighboring countries and claim it for his own and annex them. And now Brazil, which is not listening to Silva de Lulu anymore, is doing what they can to go ahead and put the kibosh on that. And they've ordered troops to the border to fight and to defend that small country against Venezuelan forces. Recently, 2 weeks ago, there was an election in Venezuela, where a woman by the name of Maria Machado won. And she is an actual Democrat, not a communist. And they said that the election was rigged, and they never went back after it. And Maduro is still running Venezuela. And if we go back to one of my previous episodes again, I'll tell you again that Venezuela is the main reason for the huge influx in all of these immigrants and migrants coming through all the South and Central American countries. They're moving north. There's 7.1 million refugees. Also, Maduro is the head of the Sun Cartel, another huge drug cartel, and hosts other drug cartels to stay on even keel with them. He also has a series of terrorist groups in there, like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and even like Hezbollah, all in his country, operating freely. And he's invited Russia and China and Iran into his country to do business with him. Now, this has taken a huge toll on all these South and Central American countries all the way to the U.S. And one of the problems with the border and the immigration problem we're having is that this administration, the Biden administration, is not talking to the country of Mexico. Probably pretty much the simplest and easiest way to quell this type of migratory flow of all these people, when most of them aren't Hispanic. I mean, they're coming out of Africa, they're coming out of the Middle East, they're coming out of a lot of locations, China, Russia. I mean, we don't know who these people are. But no one's talking to Mexico to try to shut the borders down. No one's offering aid to try to help with these refugee problems down south. They're letting them cross the border instead in the United States. And then it's like trying to control them. For every 100 we're getting, there's another 100 we're not, according to the Border Patrol. So we're really in this huge conundrum over Venezuela, but now they're trying to get world stage attention by going to these other countries. So yes, there's a big problem.
Not to say that we can't take into account the supposed 5,000 people that are being shipped here per day, and our assets seem to be on planes going over to the other countries. In other words, our assets are going out, but they're bringing some of these people in by airplane and distributing them across the United States. Additionally.
That's correct.
And so
that is correct. And the problem that we see is that there's a lot of people on Capitol Hill and they talk. God, do they talk? But where the action comes in, I'm still waiting to see that. I mean, you know, Iran's attacking us openly and we're not doing anything against them at all, other than giving them harsh words. You know, we've turned our backs on the entire Sunni population of 14 Middle Eastern countries. And we have now turned our back on South and Central America and allowed the Venezuelan problem to proliferate. And we're allowing for that election to be defrauded, those people to be, you know, I mean, the people down there are just being absolutely horrifically treated. I mean, I don't care who says what videos they got of any kind of thing of Venezuela. I mean, if you're not with Maduro, you're dead. I mean, that's the way he's been. So I'm stunned that no action's been taken, nor has there been any diplomatic front talking to Mexico or other South and Central American countries to stem this flow. It hasn't happened. And I'm still waiting for this to happen. I put a court case in against this government to do a police action against Maduro for unlawfully and illegitimately holding office. I have seen nothing about it other than the judge shutting the case down and dismissing it. I have not seen anything that's in the way of stoppage down there at the southern border. And it's gotten so bad. And now we have all these Palestinian protests going on. Most of these people aren't even Palestinian that are protesting throughout the United States, but it's caused a rift. And now there are people in positions around our country that are poised for terrorist attacks. Literally. I mean, you know, how much more can you put up with as a country and as an individual citizen not to say this is not right? And I mean, it's just gotten so over the top with all of this new information. And on the home front, how many bad guys are truthfully here right now would startle people and really scare the heck out of them. Yeah. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to raise awareness so that they go and they speak to their representatives and they really put them in their place with numbers. Get as many as you can to speak and get them to do it fast.
Well, essentially, these people are acting in treason. I mean, they're not really they're not in the best interest of the people if they're not responding to the problem at hand. And worrying about some guy and his very poor reputation and making that front center news, and then finally expelling him, taking days, weeks, and months to talk about it, versus this issue you're discussing, seems counterintuitive to the best interest of the American people. So as you look at it and you look out into the world theater at the moment, what's your commentary on, say, what Russia thinks of us right now, or what even China thinks of us right now?
Well, in a lot of ways, they think that we're weak. There was recently a meeting between the United States and China, and I made a comment to my wife while we watched the meeting, and I said, you can look at everybody in the room, but if you look at that small woman on the American side that's sitting there, everybody's going to key in off her. My wife goes, who's that? And I said, that's the head of the Federal Reserve. What it is China came at us and stated, we have billions of dollars in debt to the Chinese government. Her response was quite nice. And it stated, or she stated rather, you guys owe us almost $1.2 trillion in import, export taxes, and other debts. So the debt that China owes the United States far outweighs the debt that China is owed. And to make matters worse, the Chinese government has funded this massive military of 4 million man military and all their toys and equipment, and they have run out of money. And the deal they cut with Russia, get fuel, give them military equipment and other things. Well, fuel in China, it doesn't put food on the table for a manufacturer. Fuel does not give workers a payday to go out and be able to pay their normal bills. So in China, you have a big insurgence right now of people that are fed up, that can't get money to even just survive with, let alone take care of a family, all because China wants to help Russia against the United States and get free oil for it. And of course, their equipment is second rate at best. But bottom line up front, the Chinese people are fed up. They're broke. China is literally broke. And that's another reason you heard on the news some countries talking about, well, we're going to get rid of the dollar. We're going to get rid of the monetary system. Because the idea is not to get rid of our money. The idea is to get rid of their debt owed to the United States. That's the idea. They want to go to the World Bank and say, hey, we're going to do away with the dollar. Everything's going to be crypto with a Chinese stamp or a Russian stamp. And that's not going to work. You're not just going to absolve yourself of debt by saying, oh, we're not going to have the US dollar anymore. Nobody's going to go for that. It doesn't work that way, no matter how hard they try. So you really have a situation where these countries are dead broke and they have no means to do anything. And that's, pretty scary because that creates desperate times. But they're putting it on their own people on how they're handling their military and their military operations or their intelligence operations or even their I don't want to say, let's just say clandestine operations. That's the way that they're handling this now, with trying to come up with solutions to it. And attacking the United States wouldn't do them any good. I mean, they couldn't get enough done if they tried, but they could definitely disrupt the United States with what's here right now.
So, William, what is it that you know about our assets going overseas? Because that takes away from our defense mechanisms here. Why would we do that?
No, it doesn't take away from our defense mechanisms. A lot of people came out recently, as an example, talking about, oh, there's going to be a draft and they're going to draft 26-year-old women and all this stuff on the news. There's not going to be a draft, and that's not necessary. The United States military is broken down into different facets. One facet is active duty. Excuse me. You have active duty Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. And you have Space Force now. And then the other asset is you have reserves. You have reserves for all the components, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. And then you have National Guard units that are subjugated to both federal and state laws, rules, and regulations. And these are all what are on active duty right now. Then you have a ton of people that get out before their 8-year mark, and they're on what's called IRR status, or irregular ready reserves, and they can be recalled back in less than 8 years to go back to active service. So there's not a need for a draft, as it were. So
and the assets?
We're not weaker here with the assets we're shipping overseas. We still have our assets here for Homeland Defense. Don't get me wrong. We definitely do. We're sending a lot of assets overseas as we would in any conflict. But again, with the Homeland Security and with the Department of Defense, they look at, what threats could crop up in the United States or against the United States. And they have that response and those assets available to them. So there's not really a danger of them being short on assets. I mean, even if they have to unmothball certain things to make things happen, that's still available. Does that answer your question?
The FBI was putting out statements in the last 2 months hinting at the fact that even they're concerned about a possible insurrection or a possible event that could be dangerous here in the United States. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that their concerns are justified. I think that we've set ourselves up for failure in that regard. I think that there's a chance that they want to create another 9/11 style catastrophic attack or multiple attacks. I believe with the mood of the country, with certain groups that are in the United States already, BLM being one of them, supporting Palestinians and all that, I think that there's a real danger of this happening. Now, by the same token, there are other things where we kind of conduct self-inflicted wounds, I will say. I'll give you an example. There was a case in California, in Los Angeles, where a man came out of his home and shot at 4 intruders that were coming in. All 4 intruders were armed with handguns. And he shot at them and got them to leave, scared them off, called the cops. Well, the first thing the LA Sheriff's Office did was take his firearm. The second thing they did was take his right to own any firearms. Now, he had a wife and 2 kids. I think one was 3, one was 5. And for them to do something that drastic is very disheartening to see that because that violates the Second Amendment. He had every right to defend himself and his family. Had gone the other way, you would have been reading about a dead family slain by 4 intruders. It went this way, 4 intruders lived, took off, all had weapons, it was all on video, but this man was being accused of being the belligerent one, and they took his weapons, and they said he can no longer own any weapons in California. That's an example at a very small level of how the country is on a larger scale, and I hope that helps.
Well, I am seeing these kinds of things take place even within a cityscape of unlawful intimidation of citizens, creating the city council, creating an issue that's not there, and unlawfully surveilling and sending police to locations that don't need, they're not doing anything wrong, in other words, and then trying to shut them down and take the properties. Now, this is kind of a new level of encroachment, but that alone, this kind of chaos within on a city level weakens the infrastructure of the entire country if we're looking at anything that might be aimed at us from a world perspective. Here we are worrying about what's happening in the backyard as opposed to being a united front in cohesiveness of a community. And these things are just like what you said. And so California is, well, from what I understand, California was slated by Newsom as a bargaining chip, a tool to sell to the Chinese at some point. Do you know about that?
Again, no, I heard about that, but again, you can't go above the Constitution. There's 3 types of laws in the United States, and starting at the lowest level is state law, then there's federal law, and then there's the Constitution. Now, state laws can add to, but they can't take away from federal or constitutional law. Federal laws can add to, but cannot take away from constitutional law. But constitutional law is what the law of the land is. So when you have an incident where you're being violated, your constitutional rights are being violated. For example, the gentleman in California, his Second Amendment rights were being violated. He has a civil rights lawsuit against the LA Sheriff's Office for what they've done. He has a right to defend himself and his family. That's innate in the Constitution. So it can't be taken away. Just like my mandamus to the Supreme Court about Afghanistan, those rights under the Constitution, Article 3, Section 3, the president violated. Now, I can't say what state of mind he did. Did he intentionally violate him? Did he do it through negligence? Did he do it through bad advice? Whatever the case may be, doesn't matter. What matters is he had the time to reverse or counteract it to not violate those laws. Because that gets me to the next point that I want to make. Media has recently been asking the Pentagon over and over and over again why some of the weapons and equipment we left in Afghanistan is showing up in the bunkers in Gaza with Hamas.
Right.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, Hezbollah and Houthi rebels, they all seem to have American equipment somewhat, and it came from Afghanistan, and the Pentagon is not answering those questions.
We have an opportunity to go back to what you filed, and let's revisit the status of that so far.
The status of the case so far is the Supreme Court has not communicated back with me. They haven't sent me my case back, nor have they moved it forward. So I am in limbo, and that case is being suspended. That's another reason I added it as an exhibit to my other case I filed in Tampa local federal courts against Maduro, because it shows a willful pattern of violation of Constitution, Articles 3, 2, Sections 3 and 2 on each. And this is horrific behavior, you know. So we have to really go back and look at that and show now that the tools and equipment and weapons in Afghanistan are showing up on the battlefield against NATO, against allies like Israel and others. That right there goes to another level. And I was recently in contact with a gentleman who's lost his son. He's a Gold Star father during the withdrawal of Afghanistan. And he has the ear of a congressman. And I advised him about this new revelation that came out 3 days ago in regards to the equipment and weapons that was left in Afghanistan, where now Secretary of Defense Austin swore up and down they were scuttled. That means that the equipment was damaged beyond use. You couldn't repair it, couldn't be used. Well, that was obviously not even close to true. So now there's another level of these Gold Star families, 13 of them from the withdrawal time, that have an edge against the federal government, possibly to do a lawsuit, but also, moreover, to prove they're at fault. They left this stuff knowing it was usable. I mean, it was one thing to see our helicopters flying a year or two ago in Afghanistan by Afghani people. It's a totally another thing, another level. It's almost like a misdemeanor, and it turns into a felony now that that stuff's being used against Israeli troops and against NATO and the United States in the Suez Canal area.
Well, it's a willful maneuver at that point, because it's willfully leaving something. There's your state of mind that you're talking about earlier. They're willfully leaving something, and you know, like someone drops the bag for the other person to come along kind of activity, and now it's being used. So what you spelled out in the beginning of this interview for mentioning what Obama was doing at the time all the other things were happening, it sounds like the same thing is repeating itself right now, where somebody was in the position of actually leaving this on purpose in the setup for what was to come. Are these events that are happening today something that you think was kind of planned?
I don't think it was planned out intentionally to leave that much equipment behind. I think what it was that the president set an unlawful deadline, time frame to be out, didn't care what it took. And General Austin, who's now Secretary of Defense Austin, when he was in head of forces of Iraq back in 2013, left a tremendous amount of equipment. And if you go back to media time then, you'll see that ISIS was driving our up-armored Humvees, using our weapons, equipment, and uniforms. And we had to fight our own stuff, basically, against ISIS itself in Iraq after we had pulled out of there. And he did that for Obama on a promise of a fourth star, which he gave him, and then he got Central Command as a combatant command. And of course, after that, he took over as SecDef for Biden. So you can see where these things happen, so that he pleased, regardless of the rules and regulations or the laws that he violated, he pleased those in charge, and they gave him a position of authority much higher for his conduct and his loyalty to them, even though it was totally illegal. So he has no loyalty to his oath of office that he took as a soldier or an officer or a SecDef or anything. I mean, somebody like that, I mean, how can you even begin to trust them?
Well, they have a responsibility, and now that things are brewing in the world, what do you see is next to come?
Well, the next thing you're going to see is probably some attacks in the United States on our sovereign soil. You're also going to see other NATO countries being attacked. And the goal of these attacks is not to be, like, in my opinion, not to be catastrophic, but to be
disruptive.
Attacks. And this is what they want to disrupt, but they do test attacks. Like in Afghanistan, the Taliban and others that were with Al-Qaeda, they used to do test runs. For example, they would use cyanide in water supplies for Afghani soldiers, and they would test how much cyanide it takes to kill soldiers or whatever. And that's some of the testing that you're going to be seeing. And after that, that's when they can try to do their catastrophic attacks. And the problem is we have the apparatus to stop all this. We have plenty of infrastructure and people in position to stop this. The question is, why hasn't it been done already? The first thing would be shutting off that border, and the second thing would be shutting off any aircraft coming in with anybody we don't know. And the third thing would be start removing the people that are here unlawfully. We can track them down, even the ones we don't have or know about that got in here. We can still find them and get them out.
Well, with all the face recognition and all the other things that they're employing at this point, you'd think that they do. But, recently, all the banks and the other people in corporate structure like that are rewriting the terms of agreement. And the terms of agreement literally say, we are not responsible for your funds or anything in your account under an unknown act of God, which defines nothing, and any kind of natural disaster, any kind of event that interrupts the electricity. In other words, if you have electronic banking and something happens to electricity, they're not responsible for whatever takes place anymore.
Well, you can see the amount of cyber attacks that have taken place recently on dams, water structures, material supplies, even tunnels and bridges. There have been a lot of cyber attacks. And then there was this incident with the Canadian-U.S. border with a man and a woman driving at an extremely high rate of speed, and they impacted on a wall, and there was a secondary explosion. And I don't know about you, but I've seen car wrecks before, and I've never seen vehicles explode more than once, unless they're a fuel truck. Now, that is with two people that are in their 50s, never even had a parking ticket, have been around for years. Something didn't add up. But that was a terrorist attack. There's no question. That was a terrorist attack designed to do damage at the border of Canada and the United States. So you got to look at who these people are and why they're doing this. A lot of times people do this because their families are being threatened. And a lot of Arabs that live in the United States, whether they're Sunni or Shia, they still have family that are overseas that are easily accessible by bad guys, or they have family here that's accessible by bad guys. So they may wind up having to do something like a suicide bombing or something to that effect without ever wanting to, because if they don't, their families will be killed. So, it's the old adage, do you want lead or do you want silver? One of the two. And this is where, they don't have a choice. Become a martyr and we'll give your family, thousands of dollars, or refuse to do it and you all die. And that's just the way that, they work in the Arab country. I mean, people don't grasp that, but when they see the attacks and how devastating they were on Israel, unarmed people, men, women, and children, and what they did, I mean, now you get a little concept as to how these people think and how they act. If you're not a Sunni or if you're not a Shia, we don't care about you. You're like an animal, we can kill you. We kill animals all the time.
So you mentioned a minute ago about the possibility of, putting something in the water as a test. Were you alluding to the fact that they could do that to the people of America here, or just into the, I don't know who that would go to here in America now? You were talking about it over there, but what do you think could happen here?
Well, they could disrupt water services, for example, through cyber attacks. So it's an example of what the poisoning was, an example of what they can do here. They've already hit several dams and bridges and other things with these cyber attacks to see how much damage they could do. So if they were to take a city and be able to shut the water down, like New York City, for like 3-4 days, or shut down the electric grid, or shut down something for that amount of time, chaos would ensue. That's the whole point. They would create chaos. And that's what they want, a disruption, chaos. They want normal people to panic and freak out and turn on each other. That is a simple tactic, cutting out communications, things of this nature. Now, they can only do it to local scales because everybody's on a different server, a different network, a different whatever, but it still could be effective in key areas. Couple that with an attack or two where things go boom, and you really have set in a mass panic, a mass chaos, which will take hours, maybe even days to calm down.
Well, it appears to me that in the world there is some kind of weather modification as well. And, going back to what you said about the people that entered into the person's home in Los Angeles unlawfully, and then they took away the defender's rights. Where we have weather modification happening potentially, and really bad storms that are upending people, or sudden bad storms, sudden bad weather that's impacting people like it never has before, the insurance rates will eventually be insurmountable. Now you're seeing in Florida, it's difficult to find insurance. Similarly, if people are suing the police department because or the sheriff's office or whatever, because they took away their firearm, that again speaks to what I was mentioning earlier regarding people not having resources anymore. At some point, the insurance will run out, so you won't get insurance anymore. It won't be there for people. And if you keep suing the police departments or the sheriff's departments for silly things that shouldn't be done anyway, or in the beginning, everyone's tied up in lawsuits, and then there's no funding for what needs to be funded. Like, this seems a distraction unto itself right here, these examples.
Well, let me give you an answer to your last comment, and then I'll answer your first comment. So, as far as your last comment goes, the American people are asking themselves, a lot of them, how much is enough?
Yes.
So the question is, how much is enough? How much of the rule of law has to be eroded, or how much of my money has to go to different things that aren't required? And what it's doing is, it's, again, as I spoke to in previous interviews, it's starting to really unite Americans against this common core aspect of people in office or in authority abusing their positions. Now, you're charged with a duty, you take an oath, and that duty has to be executed. It's not free for all for criminals, and we're going to screw every regular citizen that does what they want, or does what they need to do to defend themselves. We're not going to go and take these people's money and start putting it toward these taxes that are erroneous or don't need to be there, because they're already suffering. People are done with that. So they're trying to find an avenue to get with DC on the folks that are there, to see how much it's going to take to make them do their job and restore the rule of law. I mean, a lot of people think Trump's going to restore the rule of law. I personally think the guy's going to go after people and take a revenge angle. I think a lot of people are really tired of the government being broken, and I've told people many times over how to fix the U.S. government in 30 days or less. And there's a lot of problems with the Congress and Senate. They have a lot of talk, but very little action. I mean, when you have a felon that's done something like Biden's kid, Hunter Biden, and is refusing to respond to a congressional subpoena, or refusing to provide evidence or material, there's a real problem there. Because let's face it, if somebody gets a speeding ticket and they fail to pay it or show up in court, there's a bench warrant for their arrest over a speeding ticket. But look at what this guy's done. He's violated the FARA Act, for Foreign Overseas Act. He's violated the laws of banking. He's stolen money. He's hidden money. I mean, come on. He uses drugs on a frequent basis. And so when you look at someone like that, because of his dad being the president, he gets over with it. But a guy getting a speeding ticket, coming back from work, trying to get to his wife or something, is going to jail because he can't afford to pay the ticket, and he's afraid to go to court. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
the disparagement is so wide apart that, again, people are just tired of it. So they say, how much is enough? And then they're only willing to put up with that much more. There's not much more they can do than put up with it, other than get those people out of office and put somebody else in that really wants to make a difference and is not bought off by companies or corporations or by a paycheck. So that's
it's clear that
your latter question.
Go ahead.
Now, your prior question about weather and weather being manipulated. The only thing that I've ever encountered and I know about for weather manipulation is back in the 1960s, the country of Philippines had a problem. They were not getting any rainfall and couldn't grow crops. So the U.S. government did a study for 6 months. They found that the Filipinos were burning things throughout their islands, and the burning stopped any kind of rain clouds from forming. But once the clouds formed, they were able to seed those clouds with silver iodine. Silver iodine caused those clouds to become fat, rich, and then bloat, and then eventually pour rain. Now, I don't know if that can be turned into a hurricane or a mass storm, but that is one way. It's called seeding clouds. That's been out since the 60s. It's all over Discovery Channel, so it's unclassified. But I don't know of any other methods of distorting the weather. It's a very odd phenomenon, but
well, now let's talk about MonkeyWorks for a minute. MonkeyWorks is on YouTube, and he's a fellow that's always giving sit reps and things like that. He's talking about the way he sees the flights going on back and forth, that he thinks there is a mapping of battle lines happening in this country and abroad. What do you think about that?
I think that's a load of crap. I'm sorry, but that's the truth.
Why?
I don't know why would there be battle lines drawn? The defense of the United States has been written down since the 1940s, and it hasn't changed much at all. I mean, there's contingencies for if we're invaded, contingencies if we're blown up from missiles or bombers, contingencies for any kind of armor or tank movements on this continent. I mean, they've had battle plans and battle lines drawn for a long time, and they figured out how to make essential services still operate for people in what they would call the red zones, which are unsafe zones, which is essential services deals with water, trash, sewer, electricity, things like that. So we've had plans in operation since the 40s. The only thing that's changed is computerization.
Right. So if they shut us down, and they start something in the middle of a shutdown zone and people don't know what's happening, maybe that's what he's talking about with battle lines. But he seems to be looking at the influx of flights bringing people in from over there and all the way up from South America, of course. And so we have seen that happening, and they're certainly bussing them around, as the governor of Texas is now getting airplanes and sending them to Chicago. It's happening. So where is this headed right now?
This is headed to where the Democratic cities that have been saying leave the borders open, that don't have to deal with it, start turning on the federal government, siding with the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott. They're going to start siding with him, saying this is not sustainable, which it's not. And when you have mostly military-age males, no women or children or anything like that, like the elderly or the sick, you got a real problem on your category of people waltzing into this country. The one thing that really is remarkable is when somebody crosses the border that's caught, that trips the known terrorist files or the red flag for terrorists, that point in time, the federal government's duty is to shut down that entire region of the border with federal troops if necessary. And that's something I've written to Governor Abbott about and talked to his staff about several times over. And they have not put that to the test. I don't know why, but once the terrorist is crossed, that's a problem. When you've had 3 or more terrorists crossing the border in one state, that entire state's border is supposed to be shut down. But again, I go back to my original comments. Why are we not talking to the country of Mexico and other countries about stemming this flow? Why are they not on our side? Are we not bordering countries and allies? Are we enemies of Mexico all of a sudden? So, that remains to be a really big question as to what are we doing with Mexico?
Well, Biden
Canada goes,
recently,
there's hardly anything.
Sorry, we have a delay here. Biden recently apparently talked to the Mexican president about this. However, back to your comments on his son, if there's a influx of whatever people need as their substances, perhaps there's no reason to disrupt whatever's happening, because what's happening is clearly out of balance. I think that's the number one thing. And what you're saying is that it's fundamentally dangerous. It's dangerous to a population, it's dangerous to an economic social structure, and it's dangerous for the sake of we don't know who it is. We don't know who these people are and why they're coming here.
Correct.
So do you think that those terrorists have been flagged? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they caught another one today. I'm sorry, I forgot the delay. They caught another terrorist today, and they caught one yesterday. And there's no action by the federal government. That's the problem on the one side. As far as the Hunter Biden problem goes, I will explain that to you really briefly. With President Biden, the reason that he's giving so much to Zelensky in the efforts to fight Russia and to maintain Ukraine, and the reason Zelensky hasn't been suing for peace more to stop this bloodshed, is because they have blackmail on President Biden and his kid from Burisma. And they're using it. And now you have a real problem because Israel just got invaded and slaughtered tons of civilians unarmed in Israel. And we have to go to their defense. And there's no way this country could survive if President Biden turned a blind eye to that or said, I'm not going to support Israel. But he's been going out of his way to spend a lot of extra time and money on supporting the Ukrainians. And again, it's because Zelensky knows he's got blackmail on Biden and can turn it on or off when he chooses. And so Biden has no choice but to play ball with them and give them anything they need. And this is very counterproductive. And this is mostly because of Hunter Biden, his kid. So,
that's very expensive.
If I had a child that was a criminal, I would love him to death. I would support him and defend him the best I could, but not at the expense of others, especially the entire United States. If you look at the cost of ammunition right now, ammunition has gone up 11.5 times what it used to be. Why? Because the federal government is buying it off the shelves, lock, stock, and barrel to keep our own troops supplied, as well as giving to Ukraine. You see, so we have some real concerns now what's going on. And this has become a real epidemic pattern by this administration because of Biden's personal issues with his own drug addict kid. There's got to be some tough love in there somewhere. Okay.
So, William, what is it you wanted to comment on regarding the Pope?
Okay, I wanted to bring up one point about the Pope, and I'm not being condescending or negative toward the Catholic Church or the diocese or anything of that nature. What I wanted to say was this, that during the invasion of Israel and the murder and slaughter of their people, Pope was silent. A few days after, the Pope was on the phone with the Iranian government over and over and over. But not once did he get up and put out any condemnation about the attacks or anything to that effect. He still has yet to put out anything that they've done wrong in a very large-scale manner. And I want to just call your attention to history briefly. During World War II, the Vatican and the Pope stayed silent while Mussolini and the Italian fascists, along with the Nazi Germans, were destroying Europe and killing indiscriminately Jews and other non-desirables like gypsies and others. The Vatican's claim to fame during World War II is that they secretly saved 600 Jews through the catacomb tunnels of the Vatican. And yet 6 million died of poison gas and burning. We are at a precipice now in the world where a world war is very imminent and likely, probably not like it was in World War II, but something that could be equally devastating. And the Pope has yet to come out and condemn the actions of this horrific movement in a way that motivates people to understand. We're not talking about the Crusades again. We're not talking about the distinction between Muslims and Christians and things of that nature. We're talking about the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, the most recognized Catholic and Christian out there, not condemning this in a harsh manner, but calling the Iranian capital over and over and over. I find that to be reprehensible. And then to vote on other non-war type issues and not speak out harshly about this and take sides with that is a problem. And to give you an example, there were Palestinians and other Arabs that were LGBTQ and for gay rights, and they were on the Palestinian side and protesting for Palestine. And over in the Middle East, several of them that did so were actually killed by the very same people they were supporting. You know, you don't have to believe me. You can look at the news to find out those answers. But we all have to be realistic. And if the Pope is the most powerful Catholic and the most recognized Catholic out there, he needs to be more vocal and more sincere about it. He still has yet to do anything about the bishop and the 222 Catholics in Nicaragua that were arrested and those in Venezuela.
That's right.
So
and
we're still waiting on that.
What about the Pope calling Iran? Like, how do you know that that was taking place?
It was all over the news. It was on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, you name the news channel. It was on it.
The point is
calling Iran to,
how do they know that that's really happening?
Because those were statements issued by the Vatican.
All right, so we don't really know.
In consultation with the Vatican issued statements saying the Pope is currently in consultation with the Iranian government to help ease the tensions. So
it's interesting that the Pope.
Wrong,
No, it's interesting that the Pope would side with the Vatican. Excuse me, that the Pope would side with Iran, of all countries. And isn't it interesting that you don't see Biden? Well, consulting and comforting, perhaps, right? I'm sure, right? I'm sure consulting is perhaps a better word, but Biden is not.
I think
visiting
is a better word.
Exactly.
So he's bowing to the needs of the Islamic community as opposed to calling Israel and saying, I'm so sorry for what happened, and then telling the whole world, I condemn it. Should have been doing that.
And Biden's not visiting the Vatican. He's gone to his bunker, apparently, recently. He's not condemning the Pope for not doing more either, is he? He's not going and visiting there to do some correction or bring attention or awareness. There's nothing happening like that again. So what you said in the very beginning is coming round. Now, you had one more thing that you wanted to share tonight. What was that?
I do, and I try to make sure that I put this out every single time, and I'll never stop doing this. And I don't care if you call me an ideologist or whatever you want to say, but the glass is always half full. So what I mean by that is everybody has to understand that there are ways to get through this, but, you know, requesting your help to talk to whoever your, elected representatives are, and talking to your friends, family, colleagues, and whomever you talk with to get them to do the same. Those voices in groups cannot be ignored. So you can help the fight by doing that and pushing them to do the right thing and not just give lip service. And at the same time, this will work itself out. Hopefully these attacks are thwarted prior to them happening, and hopefully that there's no real damage or harm to anybody. But we have a way of working out all these issues. It's not all doom and gloom. And I really need everybody to get that point. But we also have to be realistic about the fact that people need to be accountable for their actions. So you can help by talking to other folks and get everybody at once to shoot emails or send, phone calls, text messages, whatever, to your representatives and push your points through. And don't be threatening, just be forceful about it, saying this is your job, this is your duty, you have to fulfill this, you have to do this. And that will help aid things along faster and get us back on track in a better light. When America does better, the world does better. When China's broke and they start banging on America's doorstep, that's not going to make us give them money that they owe us, or they think we owe them. It doesn't work that way. The same thing with Russia or Venezuela. These bullies, tyrants, and thugs can be put in check and put in their place. If you're the Hispanic culture, I urge you to support Maria Machado out of Venezuela. She lawfully won the election in Venezuela, and Maduro had it submitted as being a fraudulent election and didn't give it a second thought before he started using his military to try to take over a neighboring country. So we can all be supportive of this stuff more than just, sitting back and then, sending like on certain things on social media, which isn't a good platform at all. It's better to directly send or call or talk to your representatives, your officials, or even if you're in a foreign country, talk to your officials there. There's things that are happening that can be changed. But in the end, in the long run, things will work out because, like I said, how much is enough is what the question of the day is, and that's going to bring people forward to the next level to push these bullies, tyrants, and thugs out and to push back in normal, realistic family-type issues, home-type issues, security issues, and liberty and the pursuit of happiness all at once. So that's all I wanted to make as my last point.
Well, Sergeant William Kotel, thank you so much for being here with us again on Making Life Brighter and giving us this important update. I think that you've really shed light on many things, and I always love that you share the history of what's happening, especially from your personal point of view, because you were there through all the things that you were talking about. So you have a unique perspective to share, and not enough people are sharing. What I'm not hearing are the people that maybe were there along with you sharing and doing this kind of thing. Seems like you're the only person that's standing for the people at this point in that. You are the only person that's
I can answer
coming
that.
along. Please.
I can answer that by saying a lot of these people chose to take jobs after their service is over, and these jobs are directly impacted by them speaking out. And that's why I don't receive any money. I don't have a job for these people, none of that stuff. I'm not going to do it because it would compromise doing the right thing. I can't. How many FBI agents are sitting on their duff and they can't do their job, and they're being told they have to do things a certain way, which is not the right way. And if they don't shut their mouths, they lose their job, they lose their pension, they lose everything. That's not a good example of, you being able to look yourself in the mirror. I mean, you have to be able to stand up and say, I did the right thing to do the right thing. I'd rather serve you slushies at 7-Eleven than have a high-end job where I have to do the wrong thing every day. Because in the end of the day, you're aware of it, you know about it, that makes you culpable, liable, and you should be just as guilty.
Yeah, so a few good men, right? So I want to make people aware of the fact that you also donate quite a bit of your time with helping other people. And you seem to be endlessly helping veterans with their health care, with their benefits, with the things that they need to file or do. You're always assisting others. Tell us a little bit about the veteran care system.
Well, veteran care system is kind of difficult to navigate. And there's a lot of people out there that need help. And I'll be honest with you, one of the best ways to handle PTSD or other shell shock kind of issues from combat is helping others, especially others that were in your own food group, like Veterans for Me and things of that nature. But going out and getting a homeless veteran off the street, or getting a veteran to get his medical taken care of, or some of his benefits that he or she is entitled to, is very important, especially when they're on their last leg and nobody wants to help them. Now, there's a lot of us that are out there that have that kind of problem. And the PTSD that kicks in is not always as obvious as you'd like it to be, and it's not a medicated kind of issue. You can't be medicated to get rid of PTSD. You have to resolve those demons, for lack of a better word, inside yourself. And the way I do that is, again, by helping others. And I have a great satisfactory feeling after that, and it just relieves me of other problems I may face, survivor's guilt, whatever the case may be. So those are the types of things that I like to do, and it helps me, and I hope that maybe helps somebody else that might be listening.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. I just recently found out that there's a big problem with female veterans that have children and they're homeless. This is not something I realized until just recently, and I didn't know how big of a problem this really is, but it is. To try and raise a child, and especially if you're having PTSD, they were talking specifically about females in this instance, but they're left on the streets with their kids in some cases, and more often than you'd think. So goodness, people are reaching out now and creating programs for homes for them where they don't have to be on a timeline to produce or get out of that. In other words, when they're comfortable leaving and going out on their own, then they will. And that sort of incentivizes them to do so. But what a beautiful thing that people are beginning to create safe space for those children that didn't see any combat or didn't, do anything except for come to this earth, and their parent needs a hand or solid footing, I guess is a better way to put it, solid footing. So I didn't realize that was such an issue, but it is an issue. We have a lot of that in this country, and that even speaks to the service dogs. I'll be featuring that more as we go forward here on this channel. I've been introduced to how they get treated in some cases, some really well and some horrifically. And so they too get PTSD, and there's very little being done about that. So we'll get into that another time. But Sergeant.
Well, one of the distractors, I'll just briefly say this, is that there are a lot of groups out there claiming to help veterans, and they're just taking advantage of people. These people that get these 401c3 or 501c3 tax exempt, they take advantage of the money. And like the Wounded Warrior Project, it's like 70 to 75% of the money goes to them, and like 30 to 25% goes to veterans. That's not an equal split. And there's people making a lot of money off these things. There's a lot of other programs that are good. There's some that are bad. So if you're going to help veterans through programs like that, please vet them.
Yeah, and work on sustainable programs. Work on programs where you can create something or a business that is perpetual. I don't believe in nonprofits. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm kind of like Tiffany's. It's black and white. Here's the fixed price. I don't believe in nonprofits, and I'm gonna, it's true. I'm gonna get nailed for this one, but I don't care. I think when you create a for-profit entity, it means you have dedication, passion, and commitment to that, and you do whatever it takes to make that work. So when you have that, you have pride in the fact that it's continually going and running. Nonprofits are please fund our thing, please fund our thing, please fund our thing. It takes away from the reward of the work that gets done and the sustainability of it, in my opinion. There's a difference. So anyway, that's my 2 cents for the night. Now, Sergeant Kotel, thank you so much for your insight, your intel, and your service. We will speak again for sure. Always appreciate your visiting us. And what else do you want people to know before we go?
Just want to say thank you for listening.
Very good. Very good. On that note, go jolly, everyone. Thank you for listening to Making Life Brighter. And we will be back with more. And let's all come together instead of separate, because we need each other right now. So let's make this world brighter. All right, go jolly, have a happy holiday, and we will speak again soon. Thank you.